Hello, welcome to the extra credits of Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme. I'm Trey.
And I'm Kelsey.
So Wes is back, and this time he brought Michael Cera. We've asked for this for a long time. We love Cera. He's very important to our generation. Obviously, super bad. And I don't know, like all the indie movies that came after that from him. We'll definitely be talking about some of those performances today.
Yeah.
Or Scott Pilgrim. But this has always been somebody we wanted a Wes Anderson movie, and I think we were right.
Yeah, we talked about this on our ranking pod or draft pod for Wes Anderson, right? And a little bit on Asteroid City. But yeah, like Michael Cera, I don't think we're alone in that's kind of like a dream project where him and Wes just seem so well suited in terms of their powers in comedy.
Yeah.
That he works so well in a Wes world.
I think on was it Moonrise Kingdom, that episode we did on Patreon where we were trying to cast a Wes Anderson movie, and I think we said Cera number 1 would be amazing. And again, we were right, validated.
Yeah.
Number 2, I think we said Aubrey Plaza. So that still needs to happen.
I think that's what you said. Definitely, she would really work. I think I said, or one of us said Tom Cruise, which...
Oh, yeah.
Also, if you're wondering why we have Tom Cruise here, if you're watching this on YouTube, the shrine to Tom Cruise, it's because we were doing a Mission Impossible episode, and we're like, let's just leave it up for Wes.
It looks like a Hey Arnold shrine.
Yeah. And I think Tom Cruise would be really good, similar to how like PTA used Cruise as a kind of like internet personality manipulator in Magnolia.
Yeah.
I think he could be a similar talent in a Wes world, how Wes uses like a Edward Norton or a Jeffrey Wright, like an authoritative figure.
Yes.
I think he'd play really well in that comedy. I don't know that he'd ever like do that anymore. It seems like he's going to go more towards a dramatic path after Mission Impossible. But
maybe he's with Inarritu next, after the Mission Impossible legacy has kind of ended now. He will probably be in I would assume, Birdman-like movie next. So he could be leaning into satire and parody of himself. And I think we could see something like that in the Westverse, because that kind of feels like where he was going with Final Reckoning, because that movie sort of feels like a satire on itself in some ways. Like he's like making fun of the spectacle of Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
We also have this set up because we did a Mission Impossible deep dive. We did a ranking that's on the main feed right now, but we did a deep dive to put on YouTube. And today's episode is going to be on YouTube, by the way, as well, and Spotify video. And then we lost I think it was like a corrupted file.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. And so now we just have this
It was
random
the entity.
shine. Yeah, the entity did not want to hear our takes on that movie, even though they were positive.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about Wes on this podcast.
One of our most covered directors, I think.
I think so. It's like Denis Villeneuve, Wes Anderson, Christopher Nolan.
Scorsese, probably.
Scorsese. Yeah. We've done all the Chazelles, Astors, Jordan Peele's, so a lot of the newer kind of new wave horror filmmakers. But Wes is certainly up there. And now in 2025, he's coming out with his 12th film. We've covered Moonrise Kingdom, Fantastic Mr. Fox on Patreon. We did a deep dive in Asteroid City 2 years ago, a movie that I love a lot. And that deep dive is now on Patreon. And so real quick, for new listeners and old listeners, if you are listening on the main feed, we have launched a set of exclusive free episodes on Patreon for free members. And so right now in this episode, you can hit the link in the description and you can join as a free member and see what it's like over on Patreon. We have a few free episodes on Living Plus, which is our tier for Patreon. We only have one tier. It's really simple. And for free members, you'll have access to Creed, as Sinners is still in theaters, which is a great Ryan Coogler, Michael B. Jordan episode. You'll also have access to our Mission Impossible recent episode we did, the Brian De Palma film, and our Asteroid City deep dive, of course, from 2 years ago now. Okay, so Wes Anderson, we just saw The Phoenician Scheme a few days ago. So I think we're still in that kind of headspace. So this is more of like a reaction deep dive. I thought we'd talk about his career first to see where our minds are at with Wes, because this later chapter of Wes Anderson, I think, is pretty divisive. That is like French Dispatch, Asteroid City, The Phoenician Scheme.
Yeah.
And so now I'm starting to, like, in preparation for this episode, think about Wes in different eras, because he's sort of being criticized. And this is a movie that's being, I don't want to say panned, but not as beloved as Asteroid City. So The Phoenician Scheme is being sort of heavily criticized. And I think fans are starting to see the Wes formula as something that's being a little bit like exhausting or tiring. I disagree. So I've like gone in through his career, went through like Wikipedia and was like trying to create different like mini eras. So I thought that'd be a fun discussion piece today.
Yeah, let's do that. But I mean, I think because we were talking a little bit about that as we rewatched, we went to see Phoenician Scheme and then we rewatched Grand Budapest Hotel
Yes.
and Asteroid City.
Right.
And we are like, there's just a different, vibe here. And like you said, Wes is often criticized for making the same movie.
Yeah.
And
which is crazy.
Yeah, which I don't think is happening at all. You can actually, especially when you watch all of his movies kind of in order, you see him evolving as a filmmaker, addressing different themes. But specifically, like I think the maybe gap, which I'm thinking about because of Phoenician
Scheme, yeah.
That people are having with this last era is that there's a purposeful distance that he puts between his characters or the stories, and like what he's just actually trying to make. So I don't think that in this last era, the French Dispatch, Asteroid City, and now Phoenician Scheme, people are like just respecting what Wes is trying to do in terms of like him just actually trying to make a particular type of movie.
Yeah.
They're like comparing it to all the other different eras of Wes. So do you want to run through them like in order?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's best not to do them like thematically. Let's do them more chronologically.
Okay.
Or at least that's how I set them up, and you can tell me if you want to do it more thematically. We'll see.
Let's just do it in order, yeah.
So I think the first era is the indie punk era.
Okay.
The punk rock era, which is Bottle Rocket and then Rushmore. And I think he introduced himself on the scene as this like quirky, hipster, new wave 90s indie filmmaker. And this is kind of Wes Anderson before the maximalism, but he still has that deadpan comedy. Still a little bit rebellious.
And a maximalist character at its core. Yeah.
Yeah. And the absurdity of masculinity being on the forefront of his like themes, I think, with the Owen Wilson character, the Jason Schwartzman character in Rushmore. Rushmore being one of my all-time favorite Wes Anderson movies. So kind of like an offbeat beginning to his career that's hilarious, like true comedies with some heart as well. So you can kind of see a lot of the staples emotionally and tonally of Wes Anderson's career in these first two movies in that first period. The second period is more of like a really important time for what I would say like for late millennials about found family, which is certainly a theme of like all of Wes's peers, like Quentin Tarantino or Paul Thomas Anderson, Noah Baumbach, Greta Gerwig. And these movies would be The Royal Tenenbaums, The Life Aquatic, Steve Zissou, and then Darjeeling Limited. And I think those three movies are about family dysfunction.
Yeah, a lot of also like complicated dad relationship themes.
For sure. And kind of like something new introduced here, Wes Anderson making very sad movies that are almost melancholic, but disguised as comedies, almost marketed as comedies.
Yeah, I can see that.
Which then becomes a big, I think, just a constant for him. He always makes like really heartfelt dramas, but are just disguised as like funny movies or comedies that start to get more like hyper designed as we go from Tenenbaums on. But again, like this is like really important to a certain generation. I think Royal Tenenbaums is really important to a very specific age group.
Yeah.
Like it's looked at as like a Grand Budapest level movie. Not to me. It's not like in my kind of top tier West, but I understand why people look at it.
Which is like an unpopular opinion, I think, for both of us. Royal Tenenbaums, while I totally understand why people just absolutely love this movie and all the dynamics of the different like children and this kind of funny Succession, if Wes Anderson were to direct Succession.
Which is sort of like Phoenician Scheme too.
Yeah.
Ben Stiller.
You're right. He does return to those themes. But I understand like, and this is similar to all of Wes movies. Like I could understand why something could be at the bottom of my list, but it could be at the top of someone else's.
Yeah.
I do think it has both to do with maybe what you lean towards in terms of the comedy that Wes is exploring or using in that movie, but also like it does maybe have to do with what you're talking about, this like kind of generational, when did you see it? Because this next era that we're going to talk about, like Fantastic Mr. Fox, Moonrise Kingdom.
Yes.
Those were the Wes's that we saw, the first Wes's we saw in like high school, maybe.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Do you think Wes Anderson fans, as we are fans, like I don't know if we're like we run the Reddit page fandom, but like we run the, let's say that we're like really high up on like Letterboxd ratings for the average of Wes Anderson movies. Like, so we're big fans. But fans of Wes seem to be very passionate about 1 to 2 movies and will argue those movies till they die for those movies to be like at the top of any Wes list, if you will. And we're not ranking his movies today. We've done stuff like that before, but we're going to be like going through these eras as we're saying. But this next era, you're totally right. I think it depends when you first see what Wes, whatever Wes movie that you attach to, and you're like, this is a voice. This is very unique, brilliant, funny.
Yeah.
This is what I connect to most. We saw Wes at the beginning of his like fatherhood, I think, like Wes Anderson becoming a dad.
Yeah.
And so his movies around 2009 to 2012 are kind of like dad core era.
Very sentimental. Yeah.
Yeah, not like Steve Zissou or Darjeeling or the other movies he had done where they're kind of like satirizing dads. This one's more like a coming of age journey. Yeah, this is more like a heartfelt, sentimental coming of age journey for children becoming teenagers, but also for young adults becoming like parents.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is really effective for us in particular, I think, because we were in high school during this period. So this is like the first Wes movies we saw.
Yeah.
So it made the biggest impact on us.
Yeah. Well, I think that, Wes does such a good job when we were just rewatching, like Budapest. And I think that's like probably the broadest like favorite besides like a Royal Tenenbaum.
I think so too.
But I agree with people that I think Budapest is like maybe his most complete movie, which we'll talk about in a second when we get in his next era.
Yeah.
But in terms of like Fantastic Mr. Fox and Moonrise Kingdom, the reason they're my favorites, and I think are probably collective favorites, that's why we did the deep dives on Patreon, is because it feels like Wes is really good at balancing like this empathy for his characters, and instead of taking this kind of like joke of found family in a Zissou movie, which I think works, like I like that movie. I know you're not as high on it.
I like all of his movies, but it's more toward the bottom.
Yeah.
For me. Yeah.
But like instead of that like quirkiness, he actually like takes it into like a real family, right? And he explores those kind of dynamics of the actual maybe like day-to-day grounded tensions, and then elevates that through like heists in Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah.
Or, this like coming of age relationship and the whole scout troop that Edward Norton is leading as he's kind of like this coach figure,
the
mentor,
jailbreak
right?
That happens.
Like the kids coming together, realizing like they feel guilty for bullying
Lucas Hedges.
But also like an underrated part of this too is like Frances McDormand and Bill Murray as like the parents, right? Being kind of like offline.
Yeah. Bruce Willis thrown in there in the mix.
Yeah. Like, so I think, for me that I really love Wes in that
Oh
sentimental lane, like the kind of freeze frame or the slow-mos on
God.
really like emotional moments. That really works for me.
Yeah, I think it also is the beginning to him leaning into artifice and being comfortable with artifice. Moonrise Kingdom in particular. I think the stop motion and the dual screenplay with Noah Baumbach on Fantastic Mr. Fox was the beginning to Wes just accepting that he's just going to be this like hyper stylistic filmmaker and getting the budget to do so, which because it does take some money to do both of these films, and creating such massive production designs and not relying on CGI for special effects. And so this is where we get into his next period, the artifice and the political Wes Anderson. So this is like 2014 to 2018. He makes Grand Budapest Hotel and Isle of Dogs. And this is where I think he does go full maximalist, a little bit meta too, which will be a theme he comes back to in this current period we're in. This is also where he starts nesting stories within stories. He's had narrators already in past films, but this is where he starts kind of doing meta stories in a sense.
Yeah.
He'll come back to an Asteroid City and Dispatch. But Grand Budapest feels like his biggest turning point as a filmmaker. This is where he gets celebrated by the Academy in different ways with a lot of nominations. He gets celebrated by audiences, by people going to see this movie multiple times. It made over $100 million, which is rare for a Wes Anderson project. And it's one of his it's probably his greatest balance of doing something that's hyper designed and then also deeply emotional and resonant, while also being politically interesting. And him taking some chances with the politics of this era. And I would also say Isle of Dogs is included in this because both movies are about fascism. In 2014 to 2018, the whole world was about fascism. Like that was a theme in the global politics and still is, unfortunately. But this was a huge, I think, tipping point for his career because I think he is a part of a generation. I'm not generalizing here. I'm trying not to, but that is a little bit cynical about globalization. And so like this becomes like a constant theme of the Wes Anderson project moving forward. So this is like I think Grand Budapest is an interesting sort of Rosetta Stone for the rest of the next 10 years and where we are today. So this is, I think, one of their favorite periods because of this movie.
Yeah, I think so too. I think people are like sometimes in on the stop motion of Isle of Dogs and out on other aspects of it. And we'll talk about it a little bit more today.
Yeah.
But with Budapest, I think that even though it's not my personal favorite, although it's up there for me, I think it is his best movie.
Okay.
Like in terms of just bringing together all the skills that Wes has of humor.
It's so seamless.
Yeah, the emotional depth that he is able to get to.
Yeah.
We talked about in my favorite era of Fantastic Mr. Fox and Moonrise Kingdom. And then I think also it has the best subplots. Like that is something that sometimes Wes movies can people can be in or out on, especially like in something like French Dispatch, right?
Yeah.
We saw people kind of like out on certain short stories than others.
Yeah.
But I think like here, we have like Boy with Apple, The Prison Break, Willem Dafoe, like his
Dafoe's
whole
so good in
journey, like throwing cats out the window, Jeff Goldblum's cat out the window, and skiing down a mountain. And then we have like Zero and Gustav being like, what are we going to do when we catch him? He's a murderer. Like, like just
Saoirse Ronan thrown in there.
Ronan's, so not only does it have, I think, the best like subplots and almost a Succession family in itself, with Adrian Brody as this like villainous character, but we also have an amazing ensemble.
Yes,
I think that's one of the magic pieces of Wes that people come to. It's like, how did you get this massive actor in this tiny part, like Steve Carell in Asteroid City, right? Just showing up in the background with this green visor, like managing,
selling land,
a motel and different vending machines, where you can buy land for quarters. For $10, but only in quarters. Yeah. And so like that's kind of also the magic of a Wes movie.
Yeah.
And I actually think like maybe because we don't have as much of that in Phoenician Scheme, like we don't have people popping up everywhere. It's only one person at one stop or maybe two.
Yeah.
People were maybe not as like, maybe they're underwhelmed or something, even though I appreciated Phoenician Scheme and I loved all the different like subplots and the character actors who show up here.
Yeah.
It's something like that Grand Budapest is held up because you have like Harvey Keitel showing up in a jailbreak. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think Phoenician Scheme is getting a bad rap from most critics because Asteroid City was that powerful, like straight up. And they keeps getting compared to this like meta trilogy that he's in now, which is this, we can go to this new era from 2021 to 2025. He's in this like surreal lane where his movies are about making movies. They're about making art. They're about legacy. They're about success and like dealing with success. What is the cost of it? And still about found families and trying to find purpose and meaning in this like increasingly fragmented world. And he still goes and does these kind of like, we're going to go back in the past in French Dispatch, or do this retro futuristic thing in Asteroid City, or go back in the past again, this Cold War era in Phoenician Scheme. He still does this. We're not sort of in the contemporary world, but you can map on a lot of things in our contemporary world onto these movies, like the pandemic or the quarantine in Asteroid City. There are a lot of things you can do to map on, or you can map on corporate tycoon mogul figures on a Benicio del Toro's character in Phoenician Scheme. But this seems to be an era that is very divisive. And I think Phoenician Scheme is going to be very divisive because it doesn't have that same emotional punch that a lot of people felt in French Dispatch in terms of the existentialism of that movie. And it doesn't have the emotional punch of the trauma that so many characters face in Asteroid City.
Yeah.
And Benicio del Toro and what his character is going through, we're going to get into it in this deep dive in a second, but I think just put people off. Now, I don't watch a Wes Anderson movie immediately comparing it to his other films.
Yeah.
But we do watch a lot of movies. We run a podcast. We're doing a whole career retrospective on this review of Phoenician Scheme for no real reason outside of just trying to make sense of the Wes Anderson project, because that's like what our podcast does really when we talk about auteur filmmakers like this. But I find it to be really unfair to be like, well, it's not Grand Budapest. Well, it's not Asteroid City. It's like, all right, Phoenician Scheme. If insert, 90% other filmmakers in the world, this Phoenician Scheme would be a highlight of their career.
Yeah.
Like this, I think a really seriously successful movie. But let's talk about this trilogy, for lack of a better word, between Dispatch, Asteroid City, Phoenician Scheme. All these movies are sort of about storytelling, about artists, about successful people. We have like thinkers, writers, artists to now capitalist moguls with Phoenician Scheme. So
we take a little bit of a shift, I think, in Phoenician Scheme too.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, like it's about kind of weighing the responsibility or also like the kind of what you're willing to compromise for the artists, I think, particularly in French Dispatch, maybe more so in Asteroid City, where we have like a photographer. And that's also like the most meta of his movies so far in terms of him looking at, the Edward Norton is like basically playing sort of like a Wes figure as a director, writer.
That's true.
And him like falling in love with his characters, but not really like knowing, being asked all these questions by actors, maybe not having the answer.
What does it all mean?
Yeah, what does it all mean? I don't really know. Like it just kind of happened while I was writing.
Going. Yeah.
Like you're not going to have all the answers. Just keep acting, or that could be a more meta thing in terms of also like you're not going to have all the answers in life. Like just keep living your life.
Yeah.
And then we have that like whole subplot of the behind the scenes of the play. And then also we have the Augie character who's like asking, why does Augie burn his hand on the quickie girdle, played by Jason Schwartzman?
Sure.
That his character, while he's sort of an artist as a photographer, he's also like a war photographer. And he's like asking all these questions, right? And so it's kind of like an interesting lane that Wes is going into, where he's putting his characters at a distance on purpose.
Yes.
In Asteroid City, of course, like how I just explained, with it being a meta, like he's writing the story and showing you the behind the scenes of that process. In French Dispatch, it's purposefully a more portfolio type of film where we have these like short films put into one.
Yeah.
And because they feel like heavily fictionalized or maybe fantastical, like sequences, that we are at a distance from the characters regardless. And then when we get to Phoenician Scheme, we're at a distance because this is his first almost like villainous character, right? It's almost like we were talking about a Succession character, like a Logan Roy.
An openly greedy, self-interested person.
Yeah. Who's trying to like, he's a war profiteer, essentially, right?
Yeah, literally. I mean, that's how he became a mogul. He wants to create this like military industrial site to make money off of this land. He talks about giving stipends to slaves, like this, and he like hands grenades to every person he meets. Like, this is clearly not a good person, and it's funny to cast a very menacing Benicio del Toro in this main lead role.
Yeah.
To only then turn him into this kind of sympathetic figure where he realizes throughout his journey and this kind of moral awakening he's having while doing this subplot in a heaven purgatory.
Yeah.
That, like in order for me to find meaning and purpose, I need to be with those that I love and his adopted daughter. And we'll get to all of that because it's a really interesting journey that I don't think has been taken really seriously by critics, but I connected with it. Like I enjoyed that. I liked that at the end of the movie, he's like in a bistro with his daughter, like all that stuff. Spoiler warnings, by the way, ahead. But yeah, so that really worked for me. I loved everything you said about this trilogy. I think, or I guess we're just calling it a trilogy, but I think the reason Wes has become so off-putting to people and why he's become so divisive, either there's extreme fans where there's like TikTok fan edits of trying to do his style, or there are people who think he's like deeply pretentious and like navel gazing at all of us doing 4 different stories nested within one another in Asteroid City, or French Dispatch just being sort of disjointed and existential. I think people are also thrown off or love his style and how maximalist it is and the kind of hypersymmetry of everything and the pastel color palettes, like the hipster, quote unquote, I'm not using that word seriously, elements of the Wes Anderson project, I think are now, for a lot of, I guess viewers, including critics, has now started to become like a gimmick for a lot of people. Not to me, and I don't think to you either.
No, yeah.
We discussed this on Asteroid City, but I think we talked about how he uses symmetry in his films and design and production design and artifice to try to speak to the characters' journeys in his films. Like anytime a character is going through an emotional crisis, which most of his lead characters are, to a very funny degree, to a sadder degree in other films, depending on what we're talking about, the artifice of his movies sort of tries to work as like a therapeutic device for his characters. And I think the audience that I found as a sort of like way to be in conversation with his movies for the first time in Asteroid City.
Mm.
I had not had a language to understand the Wes Anderson like emotional project where the production design speaks to the character writing until Asteroid City was so like meta about it that it forced me to like think more deeply about what he's doing, that I think was really smart. Like I think his career is going to go in a really interesting place from here on out, because Asteroid City now becomes this blueprint for how to watch his movies again and again and have a new relationship to them each time out, that I'm really excited for. So I do not feel the same way as other people about these past 3 films that somehow he's like, how do I get back to the success and the heights of Grand Budapest? I feel like these 3 movies stand alone, Dispatch, Asteroid City, and Phoenician Scheme, as like really successful projects.
Yeah, and I think, it's just like a shift, right? Like maybe people don't like change. They're like,
sure.
And I understand that maybe they aren't, like Phoenician Scheme has a similar blueprint of this, adventure comedy as Grand Budapest. And so people are just like comparing because people love Wes's project. They've seen all his movies, so it's like hard not to compare.
Right.
But yeah, I think if you look at these movies as standalones, he's actually doing something interesting. He's like most in Phoenician Scheme, the most politically transparent he's been in maybe any of his movies. And so like, he's just doing something new. And I think like we just need to maybe appreciate that for what it is and look at like, what is he actually trying to do? Is he accomplishing it?
Yeah.
I think yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, the gimmick thing might also be because he took like a Netflix deal last year.
Fair,
and he made 3 shorts that all felt like he was just practicing or experimenting with style that all kind of felt similar. I liked the Roald Dahl adaptations. I thought they were pretty successful. I thought the casting was really good in those.
Yeah.
He won an Oscar, his first Oscar ever for short film, which is pretty cool, for the Henry Sugar one.
I remember liking them, but I also can't tell you what any of them were about. So
yeah. Okay, so we can get to Phoenician Scheme now.
Okay.
Right? So let's
Should we say spoilers?
Yeah, spoilers ahead. Okay, we're going to, spoiler warning, we're going to try to get through a lot of this movie, though it is a lot of plot because we go through 5 different chapters.
Yeah.
Also, it is thunderstorming right now, so at any point, if our dog jumps on one of us, you'll know why if you're watching at home. So we're in 1950, around there. Our lead character's name is Zaza Korda, who is a paranoid war profiteer played by, again, the menacing Benicio del Toro, who I think is most known to like regular moviegoers as the guy from Sicario, that really messed up Denis Villeneuve movie, where he plays a really kind of, he has a horrible, like brutal character arc in that film that's really tragic. But he also is known to be like one of the most eccentric character actors. And I thought it was really cool to see Wes cast him as the lead here, because he is giving a Ralph Fiennes performance, like that level of a performance in this movie, but he's not given the same emotional depth as a Ralph Fiennes character from Grand Budapest. And so Benicio del Toro has to do 2 things. He's got to distance you a little bit because he is this kind of satire of a capitalist.
Yes.
While also want to bring you in at the end when he looks at his daughter and he's like, I want to adopt you.
Right.
And I felt that worked for me somehow.
It worked
I did
for me
not
too.
expect that.
Yeah.
It was like Logan Roy looking at Kendall being like, I am actually going to give you the business. That doesn't quite happen. To spoil Succession.
Well, it's not really a spoiler.
Not really, yeah. That's basically the end of every season of Succession.
Yeah.
So we see Zaza Korda survive several assassination attempts, but the movie starts with one. You hear the Alexander Desplat score that sounds very Isle of Dogs adjacent, where you hear like the drums.
The drums beating,
bump. Yeah. It's sick. And then you see this guy in the back of this private jet explode.
In like a stop motion way too. It was so funny.
It was awesome. Very funny. And we learn more about this character. We learn that he's very self-interested, very greedy. He also is trying to be a family guy, but is not really one. There's some jokes about the nuclear family. He describes his large family of 10 as hedging his bets.
Yeah.
As he's adopted 9 children, I think, or almost 9 of them.
Yeah, which I loved that part of the movie where he's like, I have 9 adopted sons.
Yes.
Just in case, the probability of one being a genius.
Yeah.
And we kind of cut to them and understand that maybe they are not geniuses.
Right.
But he gifts them like weapons, like bow and arrow.
And there's one trying to kill him throughout the movie.
I was like, I want that movie. Like Wes needs to make a movie about this kind of like Succession, orphan situation.
Yeah.
But I love that as a side plot, and also how Liesel kind of forms a relationship with those kids as well.
Yeah, so we can talk about her now. Korda reaches out to Liesel, who is his estranged daughter, a novice nun or nun in training, who is played by Mia Threppleton, who is not an actress I knew anything about before this movie.
Me neither, yeah.
We stayed for a Q&A after the movie between Wes, Mia Threppleton, Benicio del Toro, Michael Cera, which was awesome. And we learned a little bit more about her. I think this might be one of the low-key breakout performances of the year.
Yeah, she's so good.
I don't mean to compare her to other actresses. I just don't know her in anything else. So to tell listeners who are still watching this or listening to this who have not gone to see this movie, it's that good of a performance that I recommend just going to see it for this performance, because it feels like someone that's going to be in the kind of movie consciousness for a while, because she feels like a really interesting blend of a Florence Pugh and like a Mia Goth, an actor who's able to like I don't know, dive into conflicting tones.
Yeah.
Very goth to me, Mia Goth. So I really love that about her performance.
Yeah.
And she has a really good rhythm and chemistry to Benicio del Toro, too.
Like her kind of like deadpan, standoffish yet warmth and like quiet confidence was all really felt. And she did that really well in her character and showed shifts too, when also she like became maybe a little interested in Michael Cera and just what was he trying to do.
Love that.
Or like sympathetic of this figure who is possibly her father, you know. But I love their meeting like at the table, and I love how we feel like firm questioning from her. But Benicio del Toro does a great like comedic bit with the West dialogue of like, I said I'm not saying, so I'm not saying.
Yeah.
You know, like that kind of like repeating stuff.
Yeah.
And I love when you see a shift in her. This is like a good example of the performance where she is like, why do you keep saying I'm going to do this? Like, I just told you no. And then there's a shift where she is like, oh, I'm actually interested in you. Like, let's see how this pans out. And it's like, okay, I'll do it. Right. She signs. And I think that's like a good moment. I also love, you know, the introduction of all the different places they're going to go and how his will is essentially in shoeboxes.
Oh my God. So funny.
Which is a really fun, like, Wes, you know, set piece, like this kind of unique way of showing us the journey ahead, right? And he said that in the Q&A, he got this idea from his wife's late father, where he kept like his will or essentially like different projects as an engineer in shoeboxes. And he was like, I have to put that in my movie. But it just looks great. It's like a fun
It's something he's done before too. It's a little bit of a motif in the Wes Anderson project. He did this with Susie, I think, in Moonrise Kingdom, where all the things she brings with Sam. I think Sam has this too. That's really funny. So I mean,
like when he gets out of the bag, he's like, I have a knife, like macaroni, whatever. Yeah.
I mean, Wes's emotional, I guess, through line of his career has been like organizing chaos. And like that's been a really kind of funny way to describe why he cares so much about symmetry. And so, it was cool to see the boxes here. I mean, I feel like a lot of people with any adult living in the world has some kind of like financial thing like in a box somewhere. So it's very relatable
organization
to see that.
To see their system.
So then we get to Michael Cera.
Yeah.
Who again is just phenomenal in this movie. He seems like the obvious extra credit because it's just like somebody we want to give more of a shout out to. I'm so curious to where his career is going to go.
Yeah.
He reminded me of like Gene Wilder in this movie, or even I thought about Broadcast News with Albert Brooks. Like Michael Cera is at an all-time comedic status right now where he has this kind of like sad, cynical face now that he's getting older.
Yeah.
But he still has that deadpan humor that's just really like, I don't know, compelling.
Yeah.
That's also like this awkwardness that is very Cera. What'd you like about him as Bjorn, the bug tutor?
The bug, expert. I loved Michael Cera, and you said he's the obvious extra credit. He is my extra credit.
Yeah.
So spoiler, I guess, for that at the end of the episode, and I'll talk about why more. But I thought he was so funny, just like, you know, especially how they introduce him in the movie, just sitting in the background, like, hi. Like, and Benicio del Toro was like, he's been here the whole time. And I love the aspect of writing him in as like giving spontaneous lessons where he's like, should we do a lesson now? Like at dinner. And
I like him getting polygraphed every 15 minutes. The mini polygraph test.
Yeah, which was
good bit.
Made you know, in the moment while they were like rehearsing, where Benicio del Toro said something to Wes like, hey, I don't think I would actually just divulge things to him. I need to like check him first.
Yeah.
And they came up with this like, Inspector Gadget technology that Wes like uses of like a little like blood pressure or whatever, thing they put on his finger. And it's a tiny technology of the lie detector. I absolutely love that. Which, is so funny. Michael Cera passes. Right, because he's a CIA agent.
Yeah,
has been taught to cheat the lie detector test. It's hilarious.
I was wondering throughout the entire movie because they kept bringing up like, is he a spy? Is he a spy? I was like, is he a spy? Are they gonna have Michael Cera do a bit and then like be revealed as just like this geeky American?
Yeah.
Instead, they reveal him as like this hot American, like he's doing Timothy Chalamet.
Right. Yeah.
That's a good chapter of the movie.
It's so good.
Our audience, by the way, loved this movie, so that's why immediately I was like, the critics might be wrong about this one because I know we were at an early screening. There was a lot of West fans at the Alamo Drafthouse when we went. But they like laughed almost at every joke.
Yeah.
And that Michael Cera reveal where he is like actually a spy killed the audience.
Exactly. Well, the whole shapeshift to this like American persona, like you said, kind of like a Timothy Chalamet, like in Lady Bird, right? Like a Kyle. He like shapeshifts to a Kyle where he pops up his collar and he messes up his hair. It's so good just like in that forest moment because also we have such a huge relationship as an audience to Michael Cera, like our generation in particular. So to see him playing cool, similar to how he like dresses up for a party in Superbad and like thinks he looks cool.
These eyes.
That all
they cry every night.
We'll do a Superbad podcast one day. But yeah, like I have a huge relationship to Michael Cera. Also a meta relationship where he became, like you said, in like Scott Pilgrim, he became this like really interesting, I guess, like character, or he was casted as sort of this like quirky heartthrob after Superbad also.
He was a Tumblr boy. There was that was that era of 2012 to 2015. Like he was in that space.
So just this whole like persona of like acting cool and serious as this spy is really fun.
I loved your call after we saw the movie where you're like, yeah, he was like Chalamet before Chalamet, except now like obviously Chalamet is like the hot sad boy and like Cera like had his moment in the indie space, but Chalamet is also Paul. Like you can never see Cera as Paul, so like that's pretty funny.
Well, okay, before we move on from Michael Cera, I do also have to say in the Q&A, Cera dropped some like Wes Anderson lore.
This was wild.
Casting. He said, Wes and I have been trying to figure something out in terms of like being in his movie for a long time.
Years,
yeah. And
which again, we felt very validated because we had never heard that before. I don't think anybody had. Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah. Because we've always wanted him in a Wes movie because obviously he fits so well. And he said, Wes and I were at dinner, for example, with Harvey Keitel. And I was like, what?
Harvey Keitel?
Oh, yeah. Harvey Keitel was in the Jailbreak in Grand Budapest.
Yeah.
And so I was like, was he going to be in Grand Budapest? Was he going to, who would he be in Grand Budapest? Would he be like another person in the jail?
He'd have to be Zero because that's the only young person at that time. And Cera was probably like 25.
You're right.
Tony Revolori played Zero incredibly well in Grand Budapest and brings a lot of emotionality to that movie that it needs. And that the conversation between Ralph Fiennes and Tony Revolori's character when they get the breakout, when that happens, about Zero's background with his father and his family and the village he came from, that's so essential to the movie and its themes and its the political through line of that movie. It wouldn't work as well with Cera, but Cera on the cast list of the ensemble of Grand Budapest would make that movie even more iconic.
Yeah, I could see him in the Zero part, but also like I am glad actually that he wasn't because of the depth of that movie then. But I think also he could be maybe like I don't think he'd be better than Adrian Brody because of the vibe that Adrian Brody brings in that movie as a villain.
Cera today maybe could do Brody then, but Cera back then, I think he would have been one of the young people.
I think you're right, yeah. But I think it reminded me, I was like, oh, did Timmy kind of take like something out of the playbook of Michael Cera in French Dispatch? I think Timmy has a little bit more electricity running through him in this comedic, role.
Literally in French Dispatch is electrocuted.
Is he?
Yeah, when they're doing the radio route, that's how he dies in the movie, I think. Also, Timothy, like Timothy, my friend, Chalamet, I feel like brings
the internet's friend.
Such a like delusional confidence to his roles. That's why he's one of our favorite actors. Like it's a very young Leo in that way, or young Dale. that Sarah's more, his awkwardness, his deadpan energy, he clearly learned from like Jason Bateman on Arrested Development, and that's more his route. I like what you said about the electricity for Chalamet, because you have to believe Timothy's character thinks he can have sex with Frances McDormand's character.
That's very true.
In French Dispatch, and you believe that? I don't know if I believe that from Sarah.
They have great chemistry. I think it is because honestly, like Frances McDormand is doing like the legwork for those scenes.
She's a legend.
But yeah, like Timmy, you do have to believe that kind of like neurotic vibe of like, read my manifesto. I actually didn't want feedback on my manifesto.
Jerry Maguire, his manifesto.
Yeah,
his memo. Okay, so Corda...
It's actually a mission statement.
It's a mission statement, sorry. Corda gives Liesel a proposition. By the way, some of our jokes won't make sense if this is just audio for you. It's a video podcast too, so we're pointing
nodding to
things around the room.
Yeah.
But Corda... The conceit of this movie is that Corda, Liesel, and then Bjorn have to travel across this fictional country of Phoenicia, and meet which is basically the Mediterranean, and meet his former partners and help close something pretty ominous called, quote unquote, the Gap.
Yeah.
And the Gap becomes a MacGuffin. It becomes part MacGuffin for like the spiritual journey or cosmic journey that Benicio del Toro's character is on.
Right.
And it also is a MacGuffin in as far as being this like ambiguous IOU that Del Toro's character wants to share with 5 other people about money needed to build this military industrial site as this weapons manufacturer. That also, we learn at the end of the movie, has like dams and like waterways. Like he's trying to build his own nation because he's hollow inside, which, okay, like relatable commentary for authoritarian figures across the world and megalomaniacs, like capitalists trying to control countries or make their own because they're so empty inside. So that really works as a commentary. And I think it's an interesting conceit to break the movie up into 5 chapters, because Wes, like this Anderson thing he does is he always wants to break his movie into clear acts in his film, which I've always enjoyed.
Yeah, it feels like hyper organized from a storytelling standpoint. I also they show this kind of like thing that he's going to build, that he's trying to get money from everyone to make at the end, but it's so quick.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see the movie again to like really see that miniature set piece.
West like doesn't care about it. Like he clearly and quickly wants to like blow it up because he like doesn't want you to get that invested in that idea. It's more so that this guy, his meaning and purpose has always been his daughter, who's been like estranged. And, like,
right. And it's kind of like making fun of the idea that he is doing all this because he feels so lonely.
Yes.
And is so competitive, essentially. And that's why he's also staying alive and feels like he's made of steel. I also think that this particular scene at the very end where we see the like miniature of like, I think of like Duloc from Shrek, but I was thinking also of like Willy Wonka, like in a lot of ways. And the reason I also say that is because when we were rewatching Asteroid City, I was thinking how, wow, this is so like, obviously like we talked about on Asteroid City, kind of like Spielberg, Close Encounters, vibe, especially with the dad themes and mom themes.
Yeah.
But also it felt like Willy Wonka with the stargazers, right? The junior stargazers who have their own invention. It was like, instead of going to the factory to see the inventions, they like brought the inventions there.
Right.
And so I feel like it's something that I was like, oh, a lot of Wes things feel almost like in the lane of Willy Wonka, of this like very strange comedy characters who are like offbeat with the story itself.
Yeah.
But anyway, I love when he brings stuff like that into the story.
Phoenician Scheme feels more like Doctor Strangelove, I think is what you said when we left the theater.
Well, yeah, with the plane. And
the plane is like an obvious callback, but like it also felt like North by Northwest. Like there was like a satire of its own story so many times. I mean, Wes is really leaning into satire, like in this later part of his career, that I really enjoy. So a
lot of physical comedy,
we start this 5-chapter adventure comedy, anti-capitalist, skeptical of religion movie from here on out. And the first chapter is stop number 1, which is the Rail Barons, where Corda and Liesel and Bjorn visit an underground railway run by 2 characters, by little-known actors, Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
They also bring along a prince played by Riz Ahmed, which was like a fun surprise. Really I didn't realize he was in this ensemble. I want to see more of Riz Ahmed. He's not in much anymore, but he is an excellent actor. And they negotiate a new contract. This is, I think, for me personally, probably the funniest scene of the movie.
Oh, this is your favorite stop.
Easily my favorite stop.
Okay.
But also I think the funniest moment of the movie where Benicio del Toro is like, we're going to play 2-on-2 to 5. And when he says that, I was like, I'm about to watch Del Toro like go 1-on-1 with Tom Hanks. Is that really going to happen? Like, I was so pumped. I burst out laughing, which is I try not to do when watching movies.
Well, you
in the
got
theater.
the joke before everyone else because
I sort of got the joke.
Well, so they say like to settle this, we're going to play like whatever you just said.
I thought he said 2-on-2 on
2-on-2, 2-5, right? And they didn't
yeah.
show us the basketball hoop yet. But you understood that it was going to be a basketball game.
Yeah, they didn't show us anything basketball
So you
related.
laughed just like picturing that, obviously. And then like they showed the basketball hoop and then everyone laughed, understanding they were playing basketball. I think, it's fair to probably say, I don't want to be like too broad, but that Wes Anderson movie mega fans maybe don't like watch basketball or are not like big sports people. So maybe wouldn't
totally fair.
Get that immediately. So as I did not.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, I was sort of wrong because I ended up playing horse.
Oh yeah.
Which is even
so
funnier.
Funny.
And I also like that Wes Anderson watches the NBA today and he's like, defense doesn't win championships.
You think he's watching
whoever
basketball?
can hit the Steph shot? Well,
I feel like maybe he's watching Steph edits. So that's different.
I feel like there is a little bit of a mini commentary on the NBA today, or at least I mapped that on to whatever we were watching.
I don't know about that.
Or it's just like Bryan Cranston guys doing like half court shots.
Yeah. I love that Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston are like in this full getup to just play horse, with
look
their
so
like
silly.
sweatbands and are just like acting silly, like taking it so seriously, like chewing their gum. And I think they like high-fived at one point. It's beautiful things.
Mm-hmm.
I also really like, I maybe am in the like minority here, but I don't love Tom Hanks as a main character. I think that in Asteroid City, he was almost supposed to be like a Bill Murray type of role. And I like him in a smaller role that's exaggerated here. That's kind of like playing against the seriousness of Tom Hanks.
I agree.
Yeah.
Who's becoming our Tom Hanks? Who can do something like that? Is it like somebody like Matt Damon? Like I'm trying to think.
You mean in a Wes movie or just in general?
In general, in acting. Because I'm curious to who, as Wes gets older, like who is he? Like as actors age out, like Bill Murray's not going to be acting for much longer, and same with Tom Hanks. Like who's he going to use to replace some of these like what you would think of as like the American golden boy from the 90s, Tom Hanks.
Yeah, to play with that idea.
I think Matt Damon is probably the first person that jumps
Matt Damon, though,
to
is
mind.
already doing that in other films. Like, that's how he's making his kind of stamp, is being basically like a Wes extra, but in movies that are straight, he's like doing the kind of like offbeat thing where he's this cameo, and it's like, that's Matt Damon. He's like increasingly done that.
I like to see maybe like Jeremy Strong come into a Wes Anderson movie.
I would love that.
Kieran Culkin would have a panic attack in a Wes Anderson film. I don't think he could do it. Yeah, but Jeremy Strong would be a lot of fun to keep this Succession coded. Stop 2 is the Casablanca-styled nightclub. Where the main guy there is played by Matthew Almeric, I think is how you say his last name, who is the guy from Grand Budapest, who's the chef, and also then is somebody that Gustav and Zero go to see at the church.
Well, he's the chef in. He's the chef in Grand Budapest
and the chef in French Dispatch. No,
is he? I thought he was the head of.
I think people know who we're talking about. If you've seen the movie, he runs the nightclub.
Yeah.
And then this revolutionary group led by Richard Iodes, I think it's Iodes, I apologize if it's not, Sergio's character, and he starts shooting up the ceiling. He's like, hey, stop shooting my ceiling. Good bits in these stops. I think the stops progressively get worse, but the actors become more interesting in good and bad ways, and we'll talk about that. What'd you like about this chapter?
I just love him. I think he's an underrated Wes character actor. And
Matthew Almeric.
Yes. And I love how he's like, I'm not doing like what you're offering. And we see Benicio del Toro like really trying to cut a deal and failing. But we understand that this has probably worked for him in the past kind of thing in this business deal. So I loved that whole, development. And then I think he accompanies Benicio del Toro to the next stop as well.
Yes, he does. He goes to see Marty on the freighter. I think that's the Navy. And they see Jeffrey Wright. Yeah. And Wright's become like just such an all-star in the Wes Anderson campaign.
I think he's one of my favorite Wes character actors. Like he maybe had my favorite scene in Asteroid City. Yeah, I think so. With his speech. Like, and that was life.
Oh, the narrativizing his past.
So good, yeah.
So good.
And then I love here how he's just like, I love how they set this up with the grenade thing. I think this was the one where it's like, do you want a grenade? Like, I already have one.
Yeah.
Right. Bit of Jeffrey Wright. And Jeffrey Wright just
Cumberbatch
sitting,
says that later too.
Right. Yeah. And maybe it wasn't that one, but yeah. But Jeffrey Wright's sitting on this bed with Benicio del Toro, who's lost a lot of blood. And I just love the way they basically like have them in frame of their like ankles crossed, like sitting, laying down, kind of like chatting, but also like striking a deal.
But then they start yelling at each other. It's like this indecipherable like male banter yelling.
Yeah, which he does
anger.
in other movies too, right? He does that kind of with the shooting at the end of Grand Budapest where like everyone's just shooting at each other.
Yeah.
And then also where we're on the train and he shows just men's like legs moving everywhere, like shifting. Really works for me. Like, it's so funny.
So I really like the grenade thing. I feel like that can't get like, I feel like to stick on that for a second, that kind of distills the Wes Anderson humor so well. Where he'll show something of like symbolic of really tragic violence, like in this case war profiteering, and then make a sort of joke about how just the absurdity of like the dangerous things that human beings do to one another. In this movie we're following a war profiteer who has no money to give all these people at the stop, so he's like, here's more weapons, to the point where Benedict Cumberbatch's character is like, I got enough, like we're from the same family. I like, that's such a good Wes example, like a trademark of how he deals in like these very serious things, but in such a stylized, deadpan, metaphorical way.
Yeah.
That he reduces how terrifying everything is to how absurd everything is.
Yeah.
In
also
a really observational way.
It's like he plays on kind of rules of like polite society where he, in this case, he is like looking at the idea of never coming empty-handed to an event, right? And so like instead of bringing a favor or something, right, or like wine or something to someone else's home, as he is visiting everyone, he's like, would you like a grenade, right? He like plays with these things all the time.
Then we go to stop 4, which I think is the worst stop because it's the most underbaked one.
I agree.
Cousin Hilda, who's also becomes the fiance sort of Benicio del Toro's character. And yeah, this is just a strange, very quick kind of subplot to the movie. Scarlett Johansson feels misused and miscast because of like the accent work, but also doesn't get a lot to do. So I have really nothing to say too much about this outside of Wes Anderson not leaving like anybody out of his satire in this movie. Like he includes this utopia to also criticize as part of this like military war profiteer campaign that Del Toro's character is on.
Which I thought was an interesting, thematic addition to the stops along the way.
Yeah.
And he probably should have like shown more of that to kind of have that comment of maybe someone on the surface, like having this utopian rhetoric of like maybe mutual understanding or whatever, and then still like being involved in like profiting off of this war or whatever Benicio del Toro's character is making. Yeah, so I felt like, one, it was a really weird short stop that didn't totally work. And then also Scarlett Johansson was strangely, like misused, I think is the best way to put it, where I liked her as Midge in Asteroid City and I thought she really worked. But here it felt so off and like the humor didn't like totally click because it felt rushed almost.
Yeah, and it's not like a bad performance. It's just, it is like a misuse. I would say there is a bad performance and they're coming up next and I'll get to that in a second. That really throws me off where I'm like, I'm not in love with this movie, but I do love a lot of it.
Yeah.
Let's get to the other subplot we've not discussed really. We brought it up at the top, but there's a whole purgatory subplot.
Oh, yeah. Okay, this is what I have questions for you about. Like, what was going on there?
I have questions too. This is such like this is like the Anderson later period project right now. This is like his current era of like adding some kind of like metatextual, surreal subplot to Dispatch, to Asteroid City, to now Phoenician Scheme. That's a little bit confusing. It feels like you have to rewatch it because there were such specific, like minute details that were added in each new part of the subplot that you feel like you remember, that are kind of like hazy memories, even though we just saw it a few days ago, where we see Corda is on trial or like in some kind of like metaphysical tribunal that's like heaven, but also purgatory. And it may not be happening because the CIA is also a subplot and they're in the background saying that he has brain damage from taking like almost being assassinated multiple times.
Yeah.
And he's being judged not by like a legal system, even though the judge is God, played by Bill Murray, clearly, obviously. But he's
the
being
god of the Wes Anderson universe.
Truly, but he's being judged by the people he's hurt along the way throughout his life. So they could be family
the wives
members.
Were there?
Yeah, his
right?
3 wives
Okay.
that he may have killed or had killed.
He, under the lie detector test, right? He says,
I didn't kill them.
I didn't kill them personally.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there is his grandmother who doesn't remember who he is.
Oh, okay.
There's a young boy in a coffin that could be somebody he knew, or the way I took it more literally, I think, or I guess still metaphorically, his younger self when he was innocent before he became who he is now, which is like a megalomaniac, like mogul. So I thought, to me, it was effective only because of his relationship to Liesel. And I like this idea of Wes Anderson being pretty transparent for the first time in his career about being like anti-capitalist, like really clearly, like through jokes, but it's very transparent.
Yeah.
And also being sort of critical of how people try to justify poor decisions in their life by thinking that they're going to go to some kind of afterlife here, which I thought was well done. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't like too pushy or judgmental. It was just more satirizing this character and how lost he was and how he's been trying to find meaning or purpose, whether it be through like building his own nation through war profiteering or trying to get to heaven. And at the end of the day, the best thing for Benicio del Toro's character is to actually just be with the people he cares about, which is now his adopted daughter.
Yeah.
And make a bistro with her and create their own little utopia, which is like a small business, and like have whiskey with her and play cards at night without really talking that much, like with no drama. I liked that. I thought that was a good through line to this guy's journey. It does feel like a larger Wes comment about the way he views the world, or his philosophy on the world, rather. And I enjoyed that. I think Wes is still like his Gen X cynical political takes have always been off-putting to me in a lot of his movies, and probably most successful in Grand Budapest, but still a little bit kind of like he likes being an outsider because he just has like a lot of cynicism about the way the world is built, I guess, societies are built. But this is the most kind of accessible and transparent I've seen him be about, here are the things that I disagree with as an artist, and here are the things that I think people should like strive for, or I'm going to strive for.
Yeah.
Which is like making some things, being creative at a bistro, for him, being a filmmaker, and spending time with the people that he has lost throughout his life, or he doesn't want to lose throughout his life, which is this adoptive daughter. And I thought that was cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wish, that I could start a small business and or like whatever Wes is doing, of having this basically like a creative avenue where he has time to
I think they
spend
suggest
time with people. Yeah,
there's some debt involved.
But at the same time, like
they're counting every bill at the end of the movie.
Yeah. So I think, though, he is interestingly like looking at a new character at the center of his film, where he's asking like very overtly, right, the like cost of this guy's life and mission, right, along all the stops. And obviously, like, there's all these jokes about him exploiting people, right? So I think, this feels like the most straightforward and like anti-heroic character that he then, I think it does really work at the end here, where he follows through on his commentary of like why he was maybe doing this, of like he feels lonely, he like doesn't have connection. So even though it feels, maybe some people could say like forced, I actually think it worked and it built naturally to that point in a West world. Yeah,
it's just low stakes, like relative to the stakes of his past films that felt more like historical and contemporary. This felt much more like personal character journey for Benicio del Toro's character. I enjoyed something that was a little bit more grounded in this like meta Westverse that we've been in for 6-7 years. So we get to stop 5, which is this like hotel that they go to.
Okay.
To introduce the people who are going to be investing in the Gap.
Right, and everyone from the stops has come here.
Yes, all the stops people have come. And Corda sees his estranged brother, Nubar, who is played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who is in full villain mode in this movie. And he reveals himself as sort of like the mastermind behind the assassination attempts, which leads to him scuffling and fighting Del Toro's character, and there's a vial of poison gas. There's a lot of running around. There's some of the first cinematography choices I've seen from Wes where the camera follows characters through rooms instead of cutting in between rooms, or some kind of like swivel or pan or moving on a dolly. The camera literally runs with Del Toro through the hotel lobby, which was fun. That was new. I think this is a new cinematographer for Anderson in this movie as well. So he I forget the name of his long time cinematographer. I probably have it right here because I want to get his name because he's excellent. Robert Yeoman is the cinematographer of most of Wes Anderson's movies. I would say almost all of them. And this is a new one. Bruno Del Bono is a new cinematographer for him on this one. You can sort of tell in certain choices. But yeah, what did you think about this Benedict Cumberbatch chapter? Because I felt like this is why I'm not in love with the movie. This is a bad performance for me. Like, I don't think it's a good performance.
Oh, okay.
And I also, and I'm not like being super harsh here. I just don't think it works.
Yeah.
Because of what Wes asks Cumberbatch to do. And this is kind of a part of the larger like Wes problem. If you're going to say there's something, if you're going to say there's a lingering issue and there's a major criticism of the Wes Anderson universe, it's that he has this like very thin line between doing something that's like cartoonish and whimsical versus doing something that's like borderline caricature.
Yeah.
And I think this, unfortunately, is more toward the latter. It is like borderline caricature where you see Cumberbatch with like prosthetics and doing a sort of a voice, sort of not, and doesn't really have a character and feels kind of strange.
Yeah.
Off-putting, and it just doesn't work. And the dynamic isn't great with him, Del Toro. The chemistry really isn't there as like estranged brothers.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if I'd say like it's a bad performance. I think it's like the misused
like the Johansson
piece.
thing.
But I mean, but knowing like being fans of Benedict Cumberbatch,
I am. Yeah,
yeah. I think that it's not a strong performance. Like,
right.
In terms of what I feel like we know he can do. And yeah, I just feel like it was a strange decision. And the kind of set pieces itself in terms of like running throughout the hotel and them trying to kill each other, that worked.
That works. That was funny.
But like, yeah, the two actors themselves, strangely, like I think it is falling on Cumberbatch's side of maybe the lack of chemistry.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why it was. Ultimately, I think the movie lacked an emotional punch at the end because even though I liked when Del Toro turned to his daughter Liesl and he's like, "Can I adopt you?" and she's like, "That's fine." Like she thinks about it, and I like her deadpan humor as well, and that got me. Like I didn't choke up or anything, and you know, if a movie doesn't get me emotional, I question its emotionality because I'm really easy. I'm a easy crier in films, but. I feel like this movie needed like what Margot Robbie brought to Asteroid City, what Saoirse Ronan brought to Grand Budapest. There was a missing energy a depth, an emotional depth that I do think critics who are, you know, skeptical of this movie are nailing. I just don't think they're treating the rest of the movie that seriously. Like,
like I don't think the Margot Robbie and Jason Schwartzman, you know, emotional scene was at the same depth, like purposely, as this scene where he's like, "Will you be my daughter?" Very deadpan, dry. I feel like it's supposed to be showing also like he's been treating his family like a business, right? Which is also a very
great point.
Funny thing that Wes kind of has explored in other movies around like fatherhood. We talked about that whole like Darjeeling, Tenenbaum, Life Aquatic,
Zissou,
right? Like the dad figure purposely being distancing and authoritative because he thinks that's like what's best for his children kind of thing and going through his own journey. So like that is something that he returns to here as a businessman, doing something different. Like that emotionality was not, you know what I mean? He's doing something different.
It's an adventure comedy.
Yeah.
And there's a limit to the character study
it's not
of Del
supposed
Toro's
to be this big emotional break because of who Del Toro's character is written to be already.
Yeah, because then you're dangerously, I guess, treading like forgiving the character, considering what he's doing, even though this is in the meta Westverse.
Yeah, he doesn't want you to forgive this character.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so...
So, but that's what I'm saying. There is a little bit of a ceiling on the movie. I still had an incredible time with it. I thought it was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
So the movie ends with them in the bistro, small businesses, Wes Anderson's Pro.
Yeah.
Like, so all of that, I feel like we've kind of summed up the movie. We're done with the film and the deep dive. Anything else you want to add before extra credits?
I will say, unless I already said this earlier and I'm just forgetting, but I think I agree with you that the Bryan Cranston, Tom Hanks, Riz Ahmed was like the best stop. And also because we have the like Michael Cera getting drunk on 3 beers, you know, aspect of that, which was in the trailer. They knew that was like a strong scene for the comedy. But so that was the best stop, but I enjoyed the Jeffrey Wright as like character the most. So
I
he wasn't my favorite stop.
Jeffrey Wright is really like on a run right now. Like all the character actor performances he's been doing and what he's been doing with his Capital, or leading movies too with American Fiction, like with playing Gordon in the Batman too. Like, I'm really happy with where his career is going. But I really liked his performance too. I just don't really have a good memory of like what was said. I guess that sequence of the film, a chapter.
That's fair. Yeah. Well, it's hard for me to remember a lot of what was said, like in all of the the stops besides the basketball game that was kind of like iconic.
Yeah. So I guess my final thought is that before extra credits, I'm perfectly happy with this movie. Like, it's mid-tier Wes for me. It's like right in the middle of his 12 films. It's like at number 6 or 7 for me to do the ranking, I guess. But that's perfectly fine. Like I said, it would be the spotlight of most other filmmakers' careers. Like, it's really that good. I think it's just, if people feel some type of way about this movie and they're not judging it in a vacuum and they're comparing it to like his past films, especially his like last two, and Asteroid City in particular, that's just a credit to how good those movies are. Like, that's a credit to like how much I think of a masterpiece a movie like Asteroid City is, which is a big word to use for a movie that's only 2 years old. But we rewatched it the other night and I was like, this is as good as Grand Budapest, if not better, more dense, one of the great screenplays of the 2020s. And
I really changed my mind on Asteroid City. Like,
I
came
was
around
cool.
to it.
Yeah, because I think you were more like lukewarm on it when we saw it, because it was it was like a story within a story within a story.
It's also in like one location, and I'm used to going to many different places in a Wes movie.
Yeah. Okay, extra credits. I'll go first. So I want to give extra credit to Adam Stockhausen, and I believe that's how you say his last name. I apologize if it's not, but he is sort of the crafter of the West worlds. He is the production designer, and he's been with Wes since Darjeeling Limited. In the Q&A for Phoenician Scheme, Wes credited him first and foremost to the success of this movie and the success of his aesthetic and his style. Because even though a lot of the style is credited to the tone and the editing of the Wes project, it really is the production design, like to the point where TikTok editors or like the horrible people who run AI designers are trying to like copy or like mimic the Wes design, and they can't fully grasp it because they're missing that emotionality, because it's also character building in the screenwriting. But the production design from Adam Stockhausen has just been so wonderful for almost 15 years now with Wes Anderson since Darjeeling. And I just want to give him credit, because I don't think many people in mainstream audiences or audiences at large or even critics really know that name. I wasn't really super familiar with that name until Wes talked about him for a while. And, you know, all of his designs are really dense with backstory and a lot of texture. Phoenician Scheme has a lot of fun designs. I love the house, the home that Del Toro has, and all the hallways with all of his kids and the kitchen and like the dining rooms, just all these small sets that we take for granted, I think, or the jet. There's so many sets in this movie that are just going to be, I think, looked over a little bit because the film is struggling so much with that emotional aspect for so many people. Even
I really enjoyed the plane. Like, I enjoyed the Del Toro also saying like, I feel perfectly safe. You know, the different books he was reading. But the setup of the plane. And also, we didn't talk about Michael Cera. I think finding like a bomb that had already been activated, and Del Toro's character asks like, how much time is on it? 15 minutes. We're fine.
We're
like,
fine.
We're gonna land by then. But no, that's a really good extra credit, just because I think, you know, Wes obviously has a vision. You can see it in behind the scenes or when he talks about it in his interviews. But this is like a team effort to make a film. And oftentimes with general audiences, like all of the work gets credited to just a director. Which I think Wes is deserving of in a lot of ways, more so than maybe some other directors, because of his like singularity and like uniqueness. But like that's, I think his production, design is so integral to his movies. It's so important.
The success of them. He talked about on Darjeeling why he stuck with this guy, because he was like, I asked him to like build a train from different parts of India where we were, and he built all these different train carts with all these like knickknacks and all these gadgets from like those specific areas and subcultures. And I was like, this is my guy. He's obsessed. I need an obsessive guy. I just really related to that. So that was pretty awesome.
Good extra credit. I already said mine. It's Michael Cera. I just think that he fits perfectly in the Wes world. I hope that he is a part of the ensemble. I think that Wes uses Cera I think people might think Timothée Chalamet, like I said before, just because they're two like young actors and have a unique, I guess, iconic comedic relationship with audiences. But I think he's more like a Tilda Swinton. I I want to see him like used continuously like that, like this kind of quirky presence that he continues to bring back.
I hope he gets to lead a Wes Anderson movie too.
Yeah.
I would love to see him in a lead role. But yeah, I'm really excited for this new Michael Cera chapter. I would love to see him go in that kind of like sad comic direction, almost like what Adam Sandler did with PTA with Punch Drunk Love. I would love to see Cera lean into being a more dramatic actor. I mentioned like Albert Brooks or Gene Wilder, now Adam Sandler. Those actors have like a lot of emotional depth. They can also control the tone and comedy of a scene without making the movie totally about them.
Yeah, that's
Michael
true.
Cera has that ability comedically. We haven't really seen that from him dramatically, but I think it would be interesting to put him in that position. So I'd love to see that from him in the future. He also was just the best part of that interview, that Q&A. He's so nonchalant. It's so funny.
I know. I love him. Oh my God.
Okay, that was the extra credits of Wes Anderson, his career, his eras, and the Phoenician scheme. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, like the video on YouTube, leave us a comment of some of your favorite Wes Anderson movies.
Tell us your favorite your favorite character actor maybe in Wes's, and maybe your favorite Wes movie.
Yeah, I think a top 5 Wes Anderson movie ranking would be a lot of fun. So we can compare some people in the comments. So let us know your ranking of his films or anything else you want to let us know about Wes. On Spotify, Apple, don't forget to rate and review. And if you like what you hear in the review, please, kind words only, 5 stars only, if you don't mind. We're still independent show, so we rely on a lot of your ratings and reviews. We'll be back next with Celine Song's The Materialists.
Yeah.
Next week, which, unlike Phoenician Scheme, is actually getting really great reviews, which is very surprising to me as somebody who thought that trailer was like iffy.
The trailer was just cut
strangely.
Interestingly,
yeah. And I'm not sure I love the Chris Evans stuff, like and the dynamic there. The Pedro Pascal is like going to be a 100.
Also someone who needs to be in a Wes movie.
Ooh.
Yeah, Pedro would do
He would
so
love
good.
to be in a Wes Anderson movie. I know him personally. Okay, that was the extra credits. See you guys.
Bye.